Okay, so have you ever tried like planning a trip? But I'm not talking about just like picking a date and booking a flight. I'm
Right.
talking multiple cities,
hmm
maybe a road trip with friends, all while you're juggling like everyone's schedules and budgets.
Yeah,
It can feel like you need a degree in logistics.
totally. And that's just one trip.
Right.
Now, amplify that to like a global business, managing a whole supply chain or an organization trying to plan some huge event.
Yeah.
It gets complicated fast.
Yeah. Those kinds of complex planning problems are exactly what researchers are trying to figure out with AI.
Yeah.
But what's got me really excited is the potential of LLMs. You know, those large language models we're always hearing about.
Right.
It seems like they might be really close to totally changing how we plan, well, everything.
And what's so interesting is that it's not just about making planning a little easier.
Yeah.
We could be talking about AI that really understands and thinks through complex situations, like even checks its own work to find solutions that are way better than anything we've ever seen.
It almost sounds too good to be true. So what's the catch?
Well, it's not magic, that's for sure. And it's still early, but there is this new paper from MIT that everyone's talking about. It's called Planning Anything with Rigor: General Purpose Zero Shot Planning with LLM Based Formalized Programming.
Okay, that title sounds a little intimidating, I have to admit. So what's the main idea, but, in plain English?
So they've created this framework, right? It lets LLMs handle these really complex planning problems by turning them into something computers actually get: optimization problem.
Whoa, optimization problems. That sounds a little like a math textbook.
Okay, so think of it this way. You have a goal, right? Maybe it's to like keep costs down or be as efficient as possible, or even just find the shortest route.
Yeah.
An optimization problem takes your goal, all the constraints, all the different things involved, and basically tries to find the absolute best solution possible.
So it doesn't just give suggestions. It actually does the math to find the most optimal path while thinking about all the different factors.
Exactly. And people already use optimization tools, like think about logistics experts.
Right.
But usually that requires a lot of programming knowledge. What's exciting about this research is that it suggests that LLMs, they could be the bridge. They could translate our messy human ideas into that really precise language those solvers need.
That's where this whole LLMFP thing comes in, right? That framework they made.
Yeah. Yep.
Tell me more about how that actually works.
It's actually a five-step process,
Okay.
and it really mirrors how we solve problems as humans, even if we don't realize we're doing it.
Okay.
It all starts with defining the problem. Like, what's the goal here? What are the things we can change, the decision variables, and really importantly, what are the limits, the constraints, the rules we have to follow?
So it's kind of like setting the boundaries before we even start thinking about solutions.
Exactly. They use this really interesting example in the paper: a coffee supply chain. So imagine you're sourcing beans from all these different places, roasting them, then shipping them out to cafes, and the whole time you're trying to keep costs down and meet the demand.
Sounds delicious, but also really complicated.
Yeah. And it gets even more interesting because the LLM needs to understand not just what's written down, but those implicit constraints, like all those assumptions we make as humans that aren't always spelled out.
Oh, like you can't ship negative coffee beans.
Yes, exactly. We just get that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But a machine has to be taught that. So this whole thing of picking up on those implicit constraints, it's a big challenge for AI.
Right.
And this research is saying that LLMs are getting much better at it.
Okay, so we've defined our problem.
Yeah.
We've made sure the LLM understands all the rules, written and unwritten. What's the next step?
Well, we have to translate all that into something a computer can actually use. LLMFP uses the structured format called JSON, which basically breaks the problem into smaller pieces.
So it's taking a complicated word problem and making it into a neat equation.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where it gets really, really cool, because the LLM doesn't stop at just translating. It then writes actual code.
Wait, hold on. The LLM writes code?
Yeah.
So it's like it's acting like a programmer.
It's pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
It uses an optimization solver, in this case, one called SMT,
Okay.
to actually crunch the numbers and find the best solution.
So it's not just some basic logic. It's like understanding this complex problem and coming up with a custom solution.
Yeah.
That's on a whole other level. It's like this LLM is actually thinking ahead,
Yeah.
not just spitting out some pre-programmed response.
Mhm.
So we've got this solver working away, finding this great solution. But then what?
Right.
Do we just get a bunch of equations thrown back at us?
That's where the next step comes in. It's called the result formatter.
Okay.
It takes all of that raw data, those calculations, and basically translates it back into something we can actually understand. Like imagine getting a nicely formatted report instead of just a spreadsheet full of numbers.
So no need to dust off the old math textbook then.
No, no.
But how does LLMFP even know if it's found a good solution? Like, does it double check its work?
That's the really amazing part. This is a self-assessment. So LLMFP can actually evaluate its own work. It looks to see if the solution, really meets all those criteria, including those implicit constraints.
It could do that?
Yeah, it's really cool. And if something's off, it can go back and actually adjust the code or the parameter.
Seriously, so it can correct itself?
Yeah.
That's incredible. It's not just finding a solution, it's learning as it goes. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so, game-changing.
Okay, I have to ask, with all this hype, how well does LLMFP actually perform? Did it live up to it?
Well, they tested it, the researchers did, on 9 different planning tasks. Yeah, we're talking everything from that coffee supply chain to, those classic robot arm stacking blocks problems, optimizing delivery routes, even something as, relatable as planning a movie night with friends, picking out snacks, all that.
So they really put it through the ringer,
Oh, yeah.
and it passed the test.
The results are really impressive. Like LLMFP consistently did better than all the other AI approaches.
So having that structured process, that step-by-step, it makes a big difference.
Huge, huge difference. It's like the difference between, I don't know, trying to bake a cake by just randomly throwing stuff in a bowl versus following a recipe.
Okay, yeah.
You're going to get much more consistent and probably more delicious outcomes that way.
That is a delicious analogy.
It is.
But speaking of outcomes, like, what kind of success rates are we talking here? Give me the numbers.
Well, across all 9 tasks, and these are some of the most powerful LLMs out there, right? LLMFP got an average optimal rate of over 80%.
80%, that's incredible. But there's got to be a catch. You know me, there's always a catch.
Well, one of the most interesting tests they did was this thing called the mystery blocks world.
Mystery blocks world. Okay, now that sounds kind of ominous.
It does, doesn't it?
What is that?
So it's basically that same block stacking task.
Oh.
But they change all the names of the actions and the objects to completely made up words.
So they were messing with it
They were.
to see what, like, if you could really understand.
Exactly. Like to see if it was truly understanding the logic or just memorizing patterns from the data it was trained on.
So it's like if I went to a coffee shop and I was like, I need a caffeinated cloud drink.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying latte,
Yeah.
could the baristas still figure out what I meant?
Exactly. And here's the really interesting part. Even with that crazy language, LLMFP still did really well on the mystery blocks world.
No way. It
Huh.
figured that out with those crazy names.
Yep.
That's wild. So it really does almost seem like it understands the concepts and not just the words.
Yeah, and that's what's so exciting. This suggests that LLMs, they're developing a much deeper understanding of what they're solving.
That is really cool.
Huh.
But also know you're not one to get too carried away.
No.
So let's talk limitations. Like, what are the caveats here?
Right. So one of the biggest things, and this is true for a lot of LLMs, is they still need really clear instructions.
Yeah.
If the information is too vague or if it's missing stuff, they struggle.
So back to the coffee.
Yeah.
If I just tell an LLM, get me coffee,
Right?
it's not going to know what to do. But if I say, I need 10 pounds of ethically sourced, Ethiopian Yirgacheffe beans delivered to my roastery in Seattle next Friday, then it's got something to work with.
Exactly. It's all about being specific, being clear. LLMs are getting way better at understanding those unspoken assumptions, but they still need those guidelines to do their thing.
So as cool as this research is,
Yeah.
we're not at a point where we can just, throw any old problem in an AI and expect a perfect solution.
Not quite, not yet.
Not yet.
There are still some hurdles, and a lot of this tech is, still being developed.
Yeah.
But it's really the speed that things are moving at. That's what's so exciting.
Okay, so let's say it keeps developing at this rate. What does this mean for, like, the average person? For our listeners who are fascinated by this stuff, but, maybe don't have PhDs in computer science.
That's the big question, isn't it? What does this mean for you?
Okay, so let's say it keeps developing at this rate. What does this mean for, like, the average person? For our listeners who are fascinated by this stuff, but, maybe don't have PhDs in computer science.
That's the big question, isn't it? What does this mean for you? Well, imagine, planning your next project at work, and it doesn't feel overwhelming.
Right.
You put in all your goals and your deadlines and what you've got to work with. And the AI doesn't just organize it, it actually optimizes it. It finds ways to make the whole thing run smoother and better than you'd even thought of.
So it's like having like a superpowered project manager on call, like 24/7.
Exactly. Or even think about something like managing your money.
Okay, yeah.
You put in your financial goals, your income, all your expenses, and the AI not only makes a budget, but it like suggests ways to make your spending smarter
Yeah.
or your investments or even find savings you didn't know you had.
So instead of dreading tax season, it's like bring it on.
Exactly. And what's so exciting is that this isn't just about replacing human planners or just, making things a little better. It's about giving us the tools to tackle problems that felt impossible before.
You're saying it could change like what we even try to plan in the first place, not just how we do it.
Exactly. Imagine like doctors using this to personalize treatment plans,
Right.
based on your genes or how you live your life,
Mm.
or city planners optimizing traffic in real time, like as things change, the possibilities are huge.
And I just have to point out, this research was on zero-shot planning,
Right.
meaning they didn't train the AI specifically for these tasks beforehand.
Yeah, that's what makes it so impressive. They basically just threw the problems at the AI, said, figure it out, and it did.
So if we're seeing this with like zero training, what happens when we actually start training these systems for specific jobs, for certain industries? Like what could that unlock?
That's the question. We are really on the edge of something huge here. The way AI is progressing, what seems crazy now could be normal sooner than we think.
So much to think about. It's exciting, it's a little scary, but I think it's hopeful too. As always, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of AI.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, we'll be back soon with another fascinating deep dive. Until then, keep those imaginations going.